Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today, it is December 3rd, 2021. Today's show is brought to you by Sonos. Perfect holiday gift. Go check out Sonos right now. I've got a speaker in my house. It is fantastic. On today's show, we finally reached it. It is the Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma State versus Baylor. We'll discuss what's on the line, have a full preview for the game. We'll also look at some of the awards in the Big 12 conference that were handed out, and also take a look at the rest of conference championship week. Busy show coming up today. Hope you all enjoy.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Not in a normal studio right now because I am looking at my dog Bowie, who is recovering from injury and being mischievous. So I have to be with him right now as he wanders around, has some outside of the crate time. But we'll be getting to that next week. Also, new mic setup coming up. Looking forward to that. We did a couple resume reviews of Baylor and Oklahoma State, how they got here, their road to the Big 12 championship game, and kind of how it's shaped who they are as teams. You can find those in your podcast feed. You can also find them on YouTube. Just look up Locked On Big 12 right now, and you can find those things. So with that in mind, without much further ado, let's get into it. All right. 11 a.m. on ABC, number 9 Baylor against number 5 Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game. Oklahoma State opens up as a 5.5-point favorite at this time. I think that it hasn't really moved a whole lot since it opened. The one line that has moved a bit is the over-under. That's now at 46.5, according to our friends at betonline.ag. It started out around 50. It has come down a good bit, and that is considering, obviously, the health of Gary Bohannon, but also how good these two defenses are. In this series, the last two games have gone to Oklahoma State. And now let's talk about what is at stake for these teams. First, let's start with Oklahoma State. It'll be their first conference championship if they win since 2011, that 12-1 team Mike Gundy had. It would be their second Big 12 championship in their program's history. It would be their first Big 12 championship game, because it's their first trip, obviously, to the Big 12 title game. And let's take a look at the college football playoff from that perspective to talk about what is on the line here. I do still have the graphic from the other night. All right, so this is your college football playoff rankings, the latest version. Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Bama 3, Cincy 4, rocking the Cincy shirt today, Oklahoma State 5. So Oklahoma State has a few paths to get into the Big 12 championship game, in my opinion. The first thing is let's just imply an Oklahoma State win. OK State wins, Bama loss, they're in. The top four at that point would be Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, right? So let's just say Georgia win, Michigan win, Cincy win, Oklahoma State win. Your four teams right there. The order of which might change. They could have Oklahoma State jump. I'm not sure I'd have that, but that is the order right now. Let's say Alabama wins, all right? And Michigan wins and Cincinnati wins. I find it pretty hard to believe that Oklahoma State's going to jump Cincinnati. So I think in that situation, they're out. So you'd have Georgia, Bama, Michigan, Cincy. That is if Alabama wins. Michigan and Cincinnati also win as well. The other situation is if Alabama does win, then they would need a Michigan loss or a Cincinnati loss. All right, so that's the other things they would probably need to get in if Alabama wins. But plain and simple, a Georgia win, a Michigan loss, a Cincinnati loss. Those three things will get Oklahoma State into the college football playoff if they beat the Baylor Bears. I think that's pretty much the simplest way to look at this situation right now. And also wouldn't hurt for Oklahoma State to be semi-convincing in the win as well. But I think any win gets them in here. We'll see Blake Shapen, Gary Bohannon's situation, if that factors in. If Gary Barta mentions that, once the rankings come out, and OK State, if they get shafted, hey, Blake Shapen's a backup quarterback, whatever, we'll see. For Baylor, this would be their first conference championship since 2014. Now, obviously, Art Briles, they got a couple of them at Baylor, but a situation where, things we know the Baylor situation. They were co-champions in 2014, obviously shared that one with the Texas Christian University. This would be their first Big 12 championship game win. Now, obviously, Matt Rule took them to a Big 12 championship game against Oklahoma a couple years ago as well. And be Dave Aranda, that'd be pretty impressive for his second year as a head coach for them to be getting it. There is a situation, in my opinion, where Baylor gets themselves in, and let's go and look at that right now. All right, so Baylor ahead of them has Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Ole Miss. None of those teams are playing this week. So I think a win for Baylor, you could imply that they would jump all of those teams. Also, they'd flip with Oklahoma State because they just beat them. So let's just say Oklahoma State just gets flipped to 9 just for the sake of the argument here. I don't know where they put them. Baylor is then sitting at 5. If Baylor gets a Georgia win, right? So let's just say Georgia wins, Michigan wins, Cincy wins, and Baylor wins. Your options for that fourth team become Michigan. So the teams that are in, Georgia, Michigan, and then also Cincinnati, right? Those are 3 that are in. Your options for your fourth team are 11-1 Notre Dame, 11-2 Alabama, not a conference champion, 11-2 Baylor as a conference champion. It's my belief that if you have those 3, I think you take Baylor. I don't know if the Brian Kelly coaching change thing hurts them at all over at Notre Dame, but you just got to think Baylor would have wins over number 14 Iowa State. I know they're 7-5 at the time. Look at the top 25 right now. BYU's at 12. They have a win over them. They've got a win over number 14 Oklahoma. They'd also have a win over number 6 Oklahoma State. All of those would be really good argument builders. If you look at that Notre Dame schedule, there is not a lot on there that is really helpful for them. Their win against Wisconsin is really good. They've got wins against Virginia Tech, UNC, Virginia. You know, how much do those games really help you? In my opinion, not that much. So I think Baylor should be in it. That's not just Big 12 bias. That's actually, I believe, it's a pretty credible case. Now, if you're doing the whole 4 best teams type situation thing, like, no, I would probably not say that Baylor is one of those 4 best teams. They're probably not better than Ohio State. They're maybe not even better than Ole Miss. But they would be a 2-loss conference champion with wins against several, and when they beat them, 2 top 10 teams in Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and also top 20 team in BYU, and Iowa State was top 20 when they beat them. But it'd be 3 top 15 wins for them, 2 top 10 wins, a conference champion, and also comparing them against a couple, 1 2-loss team in Alabama and a 1-loss non-conference champion in Notre Dame. So that's kind of the comparison there. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll actually break down the game, but we did have to mention those implications as well. I don't love a college football playoff, but let's acknowledge that both these teams might actually have a shot to make the college football playoff this week. And look, I know the Baylor one feels outside chance, but I mean, look at the people ahead of them. It feels like they should be definitely considered. All right, quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at betonline.ag. BetOnline is the best place for all of your sports action needs. They've got college football, college basketball, hockey, baseball. If you want to bet on when the lockout might end, you can go and do that, I'm sure. Formula One, coming down to the last 2 weeks in F1, UFC, boxing, Vegas casino games. They got it all, man, at betonline.ag. Go check that out today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, locked on to receive a 50% deposit bonus right now. Bet online, it's where the game starts. All right, so this game, obviously a couple big things. The one thing I'm looking at right now is Gary Bohannon's health. Will he play? I don't think the diagnosis is great for him. People aren't really – I mean, he didn't play last week, and I don't know if he's going to play this week. He was uncertain, and I would say we're kind of erring on the side of he is not going to play unless something else breaks after this podcast airs. But right now, it feels like that Gary Bohannon probably is not going to play. I'm doing one last search here of the Twitter sphere to see if we can get any word on Gary Bohannon. But right now, I don't think Gary Bohannon's going to be playing in the Big 12 championship game. The last thing that we had from the AP is that he was uncertain. So you're assuming Blake Shapen's going to play quarterback, right? that is where, I mean, I don't know how long this conversation is if Blake Shapin's the quarterback. And here's why. We saw what happened to Donovan Smith in his second start. He torched a pretty good Iowa State defense in his first start. In his second start, he got shut out and he eventually got benched. But like, that's not really his fault. And I was talking about this week. I thought Gary Bohannon playing was a really good asset to have because he didn't play well against Oklahoma State the first time, but at least he'd seen them once, right? And having that advantage, seeing that, I know Jim Knowles brings it from everywhere. I mean, he is good at confusing you, and he confused Caleb Williams the second half last week. Boy, did he. First half, Caleb Williams had things figured out. Second half, it was a whole different ball game. Blake Shapen, while he has performed very well so far this year, that's going to be a really difficult task for him in his, what would be, I believe, his second start. While Blake Shapen has made a really good accounting of himself, this is not a situation where you want to have a guy in his second start. And I'm sure Jeff Grimes, Eric Mateus will do the best they can. I think to alleviate a lot of this, their key is going to be to run the football with Abram Smith and Treston Ebner as much as they possibly can. But how much, you're going to have to make some plays at some point in time, right? You're going to have to eventually figure out ways to scheme some stuff up. And I don't know if you can sustain that. I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to sustain that against what's been really one of the, it's not what's been really, it has been one of the best defenses in the country the entire year. I think on defense, they're going to have to be, aggressive and try to make Spencer Sanders make some bad decisions. They're going to need that, in my opinion, to make this game pretty competitive. But, this Oklahoma State defense is allowing 16.4 points per game. Now, Baylor's only allowing 19.4. So these are two of the best defenses in the country. But Oklahoma State last week, the points per game part of it, they gave up a couple extra goofy ones, you could say, that they should not have given up due to, the obviously near the goal line, the fumble recovery for Oklahoma. So, to me, this is where it starts and ends is Blake Shapen. What's he going to be able to do? Now, Spencer Sanders can't be throwing 2 or 3 interceptions this game and giving Blake Shapen short fields. That's the best way to make this thing, to make it a lot more difficult on yourself. But I think Oklahoma State has found such a groove on both sides of the ball. I mean, the offense has not been pretty, but they have had a couple nice offensive games as of late. Last week was pretty decent. They got lucky with some field position, but they've been able to win games with scoring like 24 to 30 points, somewhere in that range. They've had some outbursts offensively against, Kansas. They had a really nice game against TCU. They had a really nice game, but those aren't very good defenses. But you're 24-3 against West Virginia. You're 23-0 against Texas Tech. They really honestly scored last week, like 30 points, I guess you could say, is what they actually scored. Obviously, the recovery really did help them a lot. But yeah, so this is a team that is able in Oklahoma State to score some points, but I think they stick to their game plan, make some plays on the outside. But for Baylor, the key is try to disrupt as much as possible. Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard are going to have good games, as is Ika up front. They're going to have move some guys around, try some different things, and take advantage of some mistakes, which obviously Oklahoma State can make. 5.5, when you ask me about the spread, I'm going to lay it. I'm going to lay the 5.5. I'm going to take Oklahoma State, and that's because of the quarterback situation. If it's Gary Bohannon, I'm having it's a totally different conversation. Totally different conversation. But it's not. And because of that, I'm going to take Oklahoma State. I'm going to lay the points. I'm going to take the under because of Blake Shapen, I guess, too. 20. It's probably like 23-13 is what I think the score ends up. 30-13, somewhere maybe in that range. I think Oklahoma State handles business pretty convincingly in this game. But because no Gary Bohannon, I know they're going to try their best to run the football. And Kennedy Brooks did have some success last week, but I don't think they're good enough in the passing game. I'm not seeing a first half like Caleb Williams had last week. All right, one more word from our sponsors, and we'll take a look at the rest of the championship weekend. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to Built.com today. It's Built.com. You can check out all of the available samplings that they have. So many delicious flavors. You get the best of both worlds. It's delicious, and it's also good for your diet. Gives you that extra fuel that you need to bust down those mall doors to battle out holiday shoppers, so those elbows, boxing out for televisions or whatever you're getting right now. So go to built.com. It's built.com. Promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so other championship games. Let's start with the one that's going to affect future Big 12 members. Two of them are going to be, it's nice to see 4 future Big 12 members, 2 current, 2 future playing on championship weekend. And it is Houston playing against Cincinnati for 3 o'clock Central Time, ABC. This one's going to follow the Big 12 championship game, which is nice. A little current Big 12 and future Big 12, little Big 12 doubleheader. Houston is 11-1. They're ranked number 24 in the country. Cincinnati 12-0, number 4. They are 10.5-point favorites in this game. Houston should be 12-0. We all remember their debacle, being up 21-0, then basically just getting the lights shut out on them. Again, what it was 21-14, 21-7, 21-0, I forget what it was. And then just getting absolutely boat raced by Texas Tech in week 1, and it really should not have been that close. Yeah, it was 21-7 was their lead, and then Texas Tech took over that game. Houston, since then, has ripped off 11 straight victories, and a lot of them have not been close, 44-7, 45-0, 45-10, 40-22. I mean, they had a couple close calls, but not that many. And their defense the last 3 weeks has been playing really well. They give up 8 points, 13 points, and 7 points. Now, granted, it was against Temple, Memphis, and UConn, but the Cincinnati offense has shown a propensity to struggle at times. And this Houston passing attack led by Clayton Tune, who's been very solid for them all season. This is a decent offensive team. They really do want to run the football at you. That is where a lot of their offense has come. McCaskill for them in the backfield has been great, 16 touchdowns on the season. Nathan Dell at wide receiver is somebody that you need to watch. But I think for Cincinnati, they've come way too far. I wear my Bearcat shirt right now. They have come way too far to be stopped right now. Yeah, they're playing a good team, but it seems like whenever they need their best performances, they come out, right? How many people were worried about Cincinnati in that SMU game? A whole lot of them. And what did Cincinnati do? They came out, established themselves as, as the tougher football team and absolutely boat raced them in that game. Desmond Ridder, not the season I think we thought he was going to have, but for them, I think them also another very good rushing team. Cincinnati runs the ball for like 5 yards a carry, I believe it is. So, yeah, I think for Cincinnati, the key is stick to your game plan, play a tough defense, take care of the playmakers on the outside, or playmakers for Houston. They're a better football team than Houston is. They are. Houston's been very good, and Holgerson's super impressive, but Cincinnati's a better football team. They need to make sure that they take care of business in that game. All right, what else this weekend from championship weekend? We've got tonight, Oregon versus Utah. Utah -3. Question there is, how much can you change in 2 weeks? That's why Utah is favored in that one. And also rumors of Kyle Whittingham potentially stepping down as well. 3 o'clock on Fox, Utah State, San Diego State. If you like punting, check this one out. San Diego State's punter is one of the best players in all of college football, is going to be a great NFL player. 3:30 ESPN App State in Louisiana. Billy Napier staying on to coach that game, looking for a 12-win season, 10-2 App, 11-1 Louisiana. 4 o'clock, 3 Central, I should say, CBS, Georgia and Bama. Georgia number 1, Bama number 3. Georgia 6.5-point favorites. I know that the history between these two teams favors Alabama, especially as of late, but Georgia, I think my theory here is if Auburn could get their pass rush pretty easily, might I add, to Alabama, what do we think Georgia's going to do? I know people talking about, hey, the outside's not very tested. Well, guys have to have time to get open. And Stetson Bennett, has been very solid this year. And also, Alabama's defense is not as good as it normally is. They got a couple studs on the defense, but not as good as they normally are. So I think that line 6.5 is about right. And then also, Michigan versus Iowa. That one is a 8 o'clock game on Fox. Iowa's 6-0, I believe, this year against ranked opponents. Almost lost last week, but I'll take Iowa plus the 11. I think this game's a bit closer than that. And I'm not as what a game by Michigan last week. They finally showed up in a big spot, but will that be who they are in this game? I'll take the 11 points in that one. Also, 7 o'clock ABC. It is Pitt and Wake. I will be at this game. My father is a Wake Forest alum. We don't get many ACC championships when you are that's what he told me when you go to Wake. So he and I will be going to Charlotte. Going to make sure we get there early, though, so we can check out the Oklahoma State Baylor game. But yeah, Wake versus Pitt. Not a lot in the line in terms of college football playoff, but 11-win season for either Wake or Pitt would be absolutely fantastic for either outfit. Also, Kent State and IU, 11 a.m. tomorrow. That one is for the MAC championship tonight. 6 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, Western Kentucky, UTSA. The Hilltoppers are 3.5-point favorites in that one. They've come on really strong, winning 7 straight games. Let's see if I missed anything. No, and also USC, California, for those of you who are sickos. That is the sickos game of the week. Let's handle the Big 12 award stuff and mention a couple of them, but really break it down next week. The ones that you really have to know in terms of the Big 12 awards are Coach of the Year, Mike Gundy. I think you could have gone in the direction of giving that to Dave Aranda from Baylor, but Mike Gundy gets that. Breece Hall, Offensive Player of the Year. Jalen Petrie, Defensive Player of the Year. Offensive newcomer is Jalen Warren. Offensive freshman is Xavier Worthy. Defensive freshman, Colin Oliver. Special Teams Player of the Year is Treston Ebner. Offensive Lineman of the Year is Connor Galvin of Baylor. Co-Defensive Lineman of the Year, it's Will McDonald and Felix Uzama of Kansas State. And then the Coach of the Year is, as mentioned, Mike Gundy. Also, I forgot to mention Saki Ika of Baylor is the defensive newcomer of the year, defensive lineman, the sophomore. So there's a run through of your awards. We'll have more on that next week. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You can follow me at JoshNeighbors_. Bob Bowlesby's a happy man. 2 future members of the Big 12 are in this year's Big 12 championship. Enjoy